What's up guys, it's Rowan here from Art Smart TV. And choosing your subjects for HSC can be a lot like choosing whether or not to eat this delicious donut. Why? Well look, I could eat this donut right now and give me an amazing sugar hit, and it tastes delicious, but there are some long-term consequences. You know, the sugar hit's gonna end and I'm gonna lose energy, I'm gonna put on weight, and overall, it's gonna be harder for me to get healthier over the long term. And choosing your subjects for the HSC is really similar. You can pick a subject that can feel great at the time, but there can be a lot of long-term consequences as well. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a 4-step framework that you can use to pick the right donut. Pick the right subject. So the first thing you need to do when you're picking subjects for years 11 and 12 is you've got to start with a subject that you're passionate about. It's so important. So I chose when I was in years 11 and 12 to study geography, and that's why I'm standing here. So I've got geography. Now, geography as a subject scales so poorly. But you know what? I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I knew that if I actually picked something that I really, really loved, I'd end up doing so much better at it. And that's the tension that you've got to sort of grapple with. Do you pick something that you love and do really, 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 really well? Or do you pick a subject that scales really well that you don't like? And if you do that, the consequences could be that even though it scales well, your marks aren't great and the result for your ATAR isn't great anyway. When if you'd picked a subject that you loved, even if it didn't scale well, because you nailed it, it had a really positive impact on your ATAR. So start with subjects you're passionate about. Write a list of every subject that you love and are interested in, and then from there, we can then move in to point 2. So you've got to start with the end in mind. So today I'm at Macquarie University filming this video, but when you're picking your subjects, you need to think about what might I want to do at university. You might not know, and that's okay, but you need to think about what options do you want for yourself, because a really common scenario that I see happen is students pick subjects in year 10, study them in year 11 and 12, and then when they're choosing university in year 12, discover, I didn't take the subjects I need to study the course that I want to at university. A good example is that a lot of courses require mathematics, not general, but the 2-unit advanced mathematics, or chemistry, particularly in the engineering, commerce, and health sciences, sort of university subjects. They've got specific prereqs. So then you can be in a bit of a pickle, because you could have not done those subjects, but then find that you can't study that degree unless you do a bridging course. Now, of course, you can do a bridging course, but it's sort of like putting on weight and then trying to lose it again. It's doable, but it's challenging. It's like a fire hose to the brain of content over a short period of time. And it can mean that your foundations when you get to university are not as strong as they need to be to make sure that you nail your university degree. So start with the end in mind, check out the universities you want to attend, and work out, do they have any prerequisites or recommended studies? So the next thing you need to think about is the workload. You know, are you taking on too much or too little? And the main thing really to consider here is how many major works are going to be required for your subjects. Typically, I wouldn't recommend taking any more than 2 subjects that have major works, because they are a lot of work. But beyond that, I wouldn't actually worry so much about workload. And the reason for that is that right now in year 10, you don't know what you're capable of. You're going to grow so much in years 11 and 12. And as a result, you actually don't know what your capacity is going to be like. So don't limit yourself too soon by picking subjects that you think are going to be easier, because the reality is every subject in years 11 and 12 is going to take work. So only think about workload right now from the perspective of major works. Otherwise, challenge yourself. Really, really critical. Challenge yourself, because you don't know what you're going to be capable of in years 11 and 12. So the 4th and final step, guys, is to finally factor in scaling. That's right. The last thing that you're going to look at is scaling. Now that might seem a little bit weird, but there's a really, really good reason for it, and that's fundamentally because at the end of the day, you shouldn't be picking your subjects based on scaling. They should start with passion, but you do need to think about scaling, because it can have some implications that can be quite important. And the 2 main places we're going to look at is for English and for maths. So let's start with English. The real key for scaling with English is that you could be in the bottom 25% of English Advanced. And that mark, when it converts to a scaled mark to calculate your ATAR, will be as high as the scaled mark you would get if you were in the top 25 for Standard English. That's right. So bottom 25 scaled mark in Advanced English equates to top 25 scaled mark in English Standard. So what this really means is that it doesn't make any sense to actually take Standard English unless you know that if you're going to do Standard English, you're going to be in the top 10% of students. So really, you should go with English Advanced, because even if you're doing poorly, even if you're in the bottom 25%, your scaled mark is still going to be better than the top 25%, or similar to at least the top 25% in English Standard. Now, the other reason you should always go for the higher level subject than the low is that you can't go up, but you can drop down. So I always recommend start with the higher difficulty level, and then if you find that, as you're going through the journey, it's too hard, then you can drop down later. Now, what about maths? How does this work for maths? Particularly between standard maths and mathematics or advanced mathematics. It's pretty similar here. The scaling implications aren't quite as extreme. So you're going to find that typically if you're in the bottom 25% for mathematics, it's similar to being in maybe the top 40% or so for general maths. So it can mean that sometimes dropping down from advanced mathematics to standard maths can have a benefit for you from a scaling point of view. But here's the really, really big kicker, right? The kicker is that you could do that, but then as we talked about in step number 2, start with the end in mind, it can have other implications for you in terms of your inability to go to certain universities, like Sydney University for certain courses, or study certain degrees without doing a bridging course. So once again, the advice is, if you're trying to decide between standard maths and mathematics, go for mathematics. You can always drop down. It's easy to do. Students do it right through year 12 even, but at least you're starting there and giving yourself, 1, more options for university beyond, and then 2, you're challenging yourself so that if it doesn't work out, you can drop down. So guys, in conclusion, the key thing you want to do is you've got to pick your passions first. You want to choose subjects that you genuinely love. The second thing is you really need to prioritize the long term over the short term. So that means prioritizing what you're going to do at university and what you need for university admissions over what might feel easier at the time. So in other words, it's like prioritizing your health over the donut. But you know what? Sometimes the donut is just too good to resist. Really good. So guys, if you have any questions about what subjects you should pick, leave it in the comments below and I'll do my best to help you make the best decision that you can. Secondly, subscribe. We're bringing videos every single week, so if you want more advice like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button and put the little bell on so that you get notified when we release new videos. See you next week.